Miss Adrienne Gibson, welcome to Talking Talent podcast.
Hi, Patrick. Thanks for having me.
How are you?
I'm really well, thanks. How are you?
I'm good. It's been a year since I've seen you.
I know it's been a long time. And I just, honestly, just hearing your accent brings a smile to my face.
Time has gone fast.
Yeah, it's gone really fast, and especially so in the last few months. But yeah, it's been a very quick year.
Yeah, how has the last few months been for you?
It's been really interesting because at the beginning of March, I was concerned a bit about some of my business having to shift. But then I've been really grateful that I've picked up quite a lot of consulting work of late, and I'm actually too busy to enjoy lockdown, if you can believe that, which is a great problem to have. Yeah.
I can believe it because 2020 has actually been my best year ever. And it's been such a busy year for me as well. A very productive year,
Yeah.
but it's been absolutely fantastic. And when I see people online posting about what they're looking to watch next on Netflix or they're bored or whatever, then I'm like, wow, that's a really great first world problem to have. And it's also a
Yeah.
really big opportunity that you're wasting because
Yeah.
I believe this is a time when we should be coming out the other side of this, whatever this is, with new skill sets, new portfolios, new offerings, new, bigger, better, stronger versions of who we are as people.
Yeah.
So I've really taken full advantage of it, Adrian.
Yeah, I agree. And I've done some of it so far with some more plans to continue because I'm with you. It's a time to create and do some new things that I've wanted to do and actually try to address some things that are very relevant for people right now, and how can we support folks with what they're going through in a timely way and then something to carry forward. So I'm like you, use the time productively, but it's
Yeah.
been so productive that I haven't had a lot of downtime.
Yeah, but I've enjoyed it, But tell me this:
Yeah.
what are you working on at the moment? What are you offering to the markets?
Well, so I'm offering right now. My consulting business is what's really taking off the most because my work, as you certainly know, it's about the heart of transformation, which in business is about connecting to the people, and it's about how do we drive more engagement and connection with people. And I'm a big believer, Patrick, that this experience and people working virtually and whatnot, that a lot of positive has come from this as well, where businesses, it's really humanizing businesses because for those businesses who might not have been as empathic to the people side, they're kind of forced to have to do that right now, if not by choice, then by necessity. And I'm loving when we're seeing people working remotely, and you've got a senior manager in Germany with his 11-year-old daughter making like whack, whack, whack
Yeah,
hands behind his face during a big meeting. Or, you see that people are hosting their meetings from their kids' bedrooms. So one of the things I'm working on at the moment is some content around what I'm calling transforming with heart. And it's looking at how, business is going to be transformed in a number of ways. I mean, one is, there may be some inevitable restructuring of businesses, which may have to happen, whether it's divestitures, mergers and acquisitions, restructuring of layoffs, whatever. And I'm a big believer that even though those are very difficult decisions to make, we can still execute them and do them in a way that shows that we have heart and compassion. Another thing that I'm thinking of about how businesses may be transforming is the way that we work is going to be different nowadays. And how can we create, everybody's been talking for so many years about work-life balance. And my view is there is no such thing. It's
agreed.
like we have one life. And part of what we do to earn a living is part of that life. And it's a part of something bigger. It's not like we put on a particular suit of armor when we go into the office and then we leave all of our personal life at home. So I feel like this humanizing of the workplace is going to continue to perpetuate once businesses get back to operating. I'm not going to say back to normal or back to the way they were, because I'm really hopeful that that's not the case. I think it's a reset and a new norm. So thinking about how we transform business in the way that we work in a way that's a bit more compassionate and with heart, and how we engage our people so that people do have a bit more freedom and flexibility about how and where they do their work, and recognizing them as holistic individuals as opposed to a number or somebody who holds a seat for a few hours a day.
Exactly.
So a lot of my work is I'm going through that at the moment. So this is on the heels of I launched an ebook and did a series about leading through crisis and change. And now the other half of it that I'm planning is, now that we're starting to emerge, it's how do we transform with heart?
Yeah. And what's the ebook called, and where can people get it?
It's called Leading Through the Heart of a Storm. And it's on Amazon Kindle. And actually, people will see if they go out and look that it's very inexpensive, but I'm actually just taking 100% of the proceeds and donating them to the International Red Cross to help support their disaster and crisis relief efforts.
Yeah. Well, as you know, 100% of my proceeds from all my books ever goes to helping the homeless. But what I do is I don't give it to any organization. I go out myself, and so I'll buy stuff that they need and deliver it to them as a human. So what I'm giving them is time and money, but it's the time element which is actually more vital to them, because it's very easy, and it's in a way, respect to the people who gives money to the homeless. If you're walking past and you throw a pound or a euro or whatever into a cup, I respect it so much. But sometimes it can be a little disrespectful to the person that you're just sort of seeing them as a commodity, and you're just tossing it and not seeing the human in them. So what I try to do is just kneel down to their level with a bag of stuff that I have purchased from like Primark or whatever, and I will sit down and say, what do you need? And a lot of the time what they actually need is dry socks, clean t-shirt, maybe fresh underwear. And it's those small things which are actually so cheap. But if you're sitting outside for days on end and your feet are wet, it's a pair of socks is such a blessing for you. A clean t-shirt, a hoodie, that type of thing.
Yeah.
And I'm not criticizing any organization. But I used to work as an auditor, and whenever I audited a few large charities, and whenever I seen the amount of money that they waste, and seen the small amount that actually they have to give to the actual people at the end of the line, by law, I was like, I'm just going to do it myself. I want to give it to large organizations because it would make my life easier, but I think it's just, if I've only got £100 to give away this week or this month, I'm going to make sure they £100 goes to helping the human beings that are in need of it, and not actually end up being like £3 because we have all these administrative costs which cost 97.
Yeah.
So that's just my particular way, but I respect the fact that you're doing that, and I really appreciate it, and I know that you're doing it, which is why I wanted you to give your shout out.
Yeah, thank you. And I love your approach as well. At some point, when I do the next wave, I'll be honest with you, Patrick, I struggled to come up with just the right charity because I wanted it to be something that was really international. So I'm open to other suggestions. So maybe that's something you and I can take offline, because I will continue to do more of this, where things that I create, the money that I make will 100% go to support charities. Because I'm with you. And it is about time as well as money. And for me, even passing on the street, if I don't have cash to give someone who's on the street, smiling and saying hi and actually stopping to say, how are you today, or something, just even acknowledging makes them smile.
Yeah, that can be worth more than a pound to a lot of them, just being seen as a human being, being seen.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
So my whole approach, Adrienne, is just, I always go back to Gandhi's quote, be the change you want to see in the world. And I'm never trying to change the world, but what I'm trying to do is be a positive influence in my world. So I will always respect everyone what's in my circle who's within eyesight. So I don't get involved on anything at a global scale. You'll never see me posting about the latest tragedy or whatever's going on in the world, because that's happening somewhere else. And the thing that I can really influence is being kind to the person who serves me in the shop. Showing respect to the taxi man who drops me home, saying thank you to the bus driver. All those small things contribute so much to my world and making my world a better place. And if everyone just takes care of their own world around them and the individuals that they sort of cross their path with each day, their world will be a lot better place then.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. You and I are very aligned. I think from the moment we first met, we knew that about each other, right? I'm exactly the same. And my view is, I show up every day as my best self, aiming to make a difference that day somehow.
Damn it, you do that. You do that so much. Damn it.
Thank thank you. I do try. Some days it's easier than others, you know.
But you do it so much, and the thing is, when I meet you, what I see is the truth. You know, I see a girl who's just telling me her truth. Some days you're tired, some days you're happy, some days you're energized, some days you're inside out, some days you're outside. But I always know I'm getting the true Adrienne, and I know that even though you are tired or whatever, you're still trying to be the best you can for your world as well. And I have always appreciated that about you.
Yeah, and likewise. And it's so nice because you bring such joy and happiness everywhere you go that it's infectious. So there's a lot of that where when we are showing up as our best selves, it does have a positive effect on other people, consciously or not.
And this just reminds me of something, actually. Now that I go back, you give the best hugs as well. And we're in a world now where people are a bit freaked out about, like, not in Sweden, things are quite normal, you know, respectfully normal. I'm not going to say normal, but respectfully normal when we still live our normal lives. But I see people around the rest of the world going out wearing rubber gloves, posting photos of themselves with masks, and they're treating other humans almost like they're atomic bombs.
Yeah.
And I'm like, no, it's that human contact. Like, that's where you get your health from. Like, detaching yourself from people and looking at them like they're basically dangerous weapons is the opposite of health, and it will actually lead to long-term mental disorder and physical disorders. So I'm open for hugs for people, and I have been, but respectfully. Like, I've in the past whatever it is, 4 months, I've probably given 10 hugs as opposed to 200 hugs. Do you know?
I was going to say, you in 4 months.
Do you know what I mean?
At least
but
10 hugs a day. What
yeah,
are
that's what I mean.
about?
But if people are open to it, I know that they need it, and I think just human contact. It might only be a pat in the back, or it might be a fist bump, or something like that. But people need the electricity that transmutes between humans when they touch.
Yeah, I agree. The first couple of weeks, I think I spent 16 days without engaging with another person. I mean, obviously I did via, video conferencing or phone or things like that, but not physically being in a close space with someone. And I found that very difficult because you do feel a little bit. I'm one who's very independent, as you certainly know. But there is a sense of when you don't have someone physically in your space, you can connect virtually, etc. But there's still that level of loneliness that can come in when you're not physically around people.
Yeah.
And I found myself when I was out walking in the early days of some of this, I was just kind of carrying on as normal, and even though you would be standing a little further away from people, chit-chatting and talking to folks out walking their dog. And I found in the first few weeks, probably the first 3 to 4 weeks, things were so incredibly friendly because there were so few people out. But those who were, that just passing and saying, good morning, how are you today? Just something where people were just craving interaction with people because it's so necessary.
And they were probably the people too who were the most open as well. The people who are the more closed-minded are the people who's going to take in what they see in the media and take it by word and just sort of lock themselves up. And like I see people like that from time to time in Stockholm. Not many of them now, but I guess the people who are like that are actually have been locked up for the last 16 weeks or whatever, and they're afraid to come out. But I'm so respectful for those people because I know to be fearful of something is horrible, but fear is real within that person's mind. I remember a few years ago going home to my family in Northern Ireland. And I don't have a TV, and I'm not connected to the news, as I said. But there was reports on the BBC News about ISIS was coming, and this news report on BBC 6 o'clock news was almost said in a way that they're literally at the other side of the hill, and they're going to be here like any second. And it was done in such a way that I was like, wow, I'm sort of, I almost, if I didn't know any better, I would almost think this is true. But they sold it in such a way that I've really felt for the elderly who don't know what the word's about. They think that these Muslims are going to come out and attack them and stuff like this or whatever. The way it was sold on the media. And of course today it's black people versus white people. Last week it was coronavirus. Yeah. It's always something to keep people in a heightened state of fear. But the thing is, people are awesome. And people will always prove you right. That's my approach to people. If I walk into a room, or I'm about to walk into a room, I always think that the people in here are going to be awesome. and they always prove me right. They are awesome. And I think that anytime I've ever thought that I'm going to walk into a room and people are going to be stuck up or unfriendly or whatever, they've always proved me right. So it's actually
Mm.
my intention before I enter the room, which creates what's in the room. So I always just assume every person I meet, no matter race, color, creed, religion, faith, whatever, they're going to be awesome, and they always are.
I agree, and I love your view about no media news kind of thing. I've stopped watching the news probably about, I don't know, 3 4 years ago as well, and I am blissfully happy in my little bubble of not being hyped up by all the news coverage, etc. And of course, you learn about the things that you are really, really important as you talk to people. And I'm a big believer, like you, is that fear drives certain behaviors, and I recognize that a lot of people get fearful about a lot of things, and I'm not trying to diminish that. But fear drives certain behaviors, and for me, it's I don't want to operate from a place of fear. I want to operate from a place of love and compassion.
Yeah.
And my biggest mission in life is trying to connect with people and bring people closer together, regardless of nationality or color or religion or whatever. Is that at the core, we're all really the same. We all have hopes and dreams. We all have people we love or whatever. And it's how do we connect with the essence of people at their core, irrespective of all the other things that we can put them in a particular category.
Yeah, I love that actually. And I
Yeah.
mean, so you're living in the most multicultural city in the world, in London at the moment,
Yeah.
and you've come from America, which is a very multicultural society anyway. So
Yeah.
you really have you've really grown up with that, and now have an opportunity in your adult life as well to mix with peoples of all races, backgrounds, everything. And
Well, it's interesting too, Patrick. I don't know if you know this about me, but I actually grew up in Alabama,
yeah, I do.
and my heritage. When I was growing up, I mean, we talk about if we talk about race for a moment. My parents grew up in the era when the Civil Rights Act was going on, when they were in university, so it's still very new. And even for myself, when growing up, there was still, it was, equal rights were there. But to be very frank with you, I don't think it was practiced day in and day out when I was growing up as much as A, it should have been, and B, it is now. But the neighborhood that I grew up with was so predominantly white, middle class, that there was still forced integration going on when I was in junior high school. And so there was a junior high school that was in a more rural part of the state that was about a half-hour bus ride from my neighborhood. And because it was a predominantly black middle school, and near me was the predominantly white middle school. There were groups of us that were bused out to this other school because they were still trying to force integration because it hadn't happened naturally, right? The civil rights movement happened in the 60s, and then we were talking about 20 years later in the 80s, because of where people lived, and people would still congregate together a lot of times based on race. I'm not saying exclusively, but it was naturally occurring that way. It meant that a lot of the schools were still inadvertently segregated because of the way that people lived. So, here I am, a first generation, really, for me, because my mom grew up when there was still segregation. When she grew up, it was only when she was in her 20s that started to change. So for me, even once segregation was supposedly overcome, it was still happening, and we had a forced integration.
Yeah.
So it's been an interesting experience for me to go from growing up that way, and I'm very grateful because I was always raised to be inclusive by my mom. There's a great story about that, but she was very passionate about it, and so I was always raised that way. But I didn't really get my multicultural experience so much until I moved to London 11 years
Oh
ago.
wow. Well, you know
Yeah.
that in Northern Ireland we're still completely separated, like the Protestants and the Catholics. Like
Oh,
if you
yeah.
look at, and people, this is today, like the peace wall that runs through Belfast doesn't, like they took down the Berlin Wall 25 or 27 years ago. The peace wall in Northern Ireland gets higher every summer. The people
Mm.
still live in Catholic communities and Protestant communities. there's no trains that run through Catholic towns. There's no motorways that go to the west side of the country at all. And I used to. It was only in the past year that I seen something on the BBC website about they were going to invest X billions into Northern Ireland's rail and road infrastructure. And I don't even bother about it because I know Northern Ireland's politically just a mess. But I thought that's brilliant news, and I looked at it, and it showed me the map. Like one of these graphics, like this is where we're going to upgrade the society. But what they were going to do is make the good roads and train stations that were already there even better. So the part where I'm from, at the west, where they have no motorways, no trains, we're just going to be even more neglected. And in fact, whenever the British were leaving Northern Ireland, what they did is they dug up the railway stations that ran through the Catholic areas, and they moved a lot of the services to the Protestant areas, and that's still the case today. And so I'm fully aware of segregation, and I'm fully aware about being on the receiving end of it. And it's a horrible thing, and it's a horrible thing that exists probably in every community on the planet to this day. It's not something that was eradicated when a rule was brought in a certain part of the world, aka like America. It exists in Sweden today because we have all these wonderful people coming up from the Middle East, and as refugees and stuff. We have now a two-tier society where the locals live the way they've always lived, and because Sweden brought in 100,000 refugees a year, where do you put these people? Well, you build accommodation for them that basically is high-rise apartments, and they all sort of stay there with people who have all sort of emigrated at the same time. So it's almost like these blocks of people, depending on when they arrived, are sort of clumped together by year, you could almost say. And it's the same across Europe. All the cities and countries that have taken in refugees during these last wars and crises have all now ended up these two-tier societies where the people who were there live their normal life and go on, and we might cross each other on the train or in the central station, but that's the amount of our sort of interactions. And of course, I live on the Blue Line, which is the train line that takes you out towards a lot of these regions where a lot of the refugees are. And I always have a chat with them because I'm on a train. I might as well chat to the guy beside me or the girl.
Yeah.
And I always ask them, "How do you find Sweden?" And none of them like it. It's just they have had a higher standard of living, but a worse life. So they've now got more access to safer stuff in a cleaner environment. But they probably went from being respected members of the society there to just people who have thrown in with different countries from whatever countries were at war or were having trouble at that time. They're just sort of all lumped in together, and they're all now just the immigrants. So that segregation is strong, and it's increasing across the world. So it's we shouldn't compartmentalize it into Alabama in the 50s and think that the great work that Jewish people did down there has been sufficient, because it's growing and growing around the rest of the world on a daily basis,
And there's so much of, unfortunately, in humanity, there's so much of an us versus them mentality. And that breaks my heart. So honestly, Patrick, one of the things that I'm striving towards, and I'm not doing the work fully yet, but I'm working towards, is more about truly how do you help people see folks in a different way? How do you help change perspectives about the way we view human beings, irrespective of what category, right? Because whether you can go to so many dimensions that we can put people in categories, buckets, whatever, about why they're different to me and why I shouldn't like them because they're different to me, or why I should treat them differently because they're different to me. But at the end of the day, all of these labels fall away. You've got a human being with a heart, and it's how do we see past that, And, I know you believe in the same thing. I think that's part of why you and I clicked so well. We met last year, but it is about how do we get past all of that to just genuinely connect at a heart level with human beings. There's a lot of work to be done in that space all over the world, I don't think any country is without that. It's at some level. Whether it be class or race or religion or whatever you want to call it.
There's division.
There's always something, right? Yeah.
I think I can only I think the same maybe for you. I think we've sort of been the same journey in a way that even though we weren't from perfect backgrounds, as like Stepford wife sort of backgrounds, that type of thing, I think we both took responsibility for ourselves and our own path. And I think when you look into yourself and try and take responsibility for the person you are today and the person you want to be tomorrow, that actually gives you such an empowered state of consciousness that then by looking within yourself, you can see you within others.
Yeah.
And if you don't look in yourself and help yourself, then you can't really help others because you can't see the pain that's in them.
Yeah,
And
I agree. It does take a lot of personal self discovery. It takes a lot of working on you before you can really see people for who they truly are. Because a lot of times, until you're aware, the judgments that you see in other people are actually just judgments you have within yourself.
exactly.
That's being reflected through others. And one of the ways that we can help heal the world is by healing ourselves, addressing and being honest with ourselves about how we show up, what our beliefs are, and where we're holding ourselves back, and get ourselves to a place that we want to be. And then that suddenly starts to, it really does have a ripple effect, in the people around us, in the environments that we're in, etc. It starts to just eke out, and we then see the world differently as well.
Yeah. And also the relationships we have
Yeah.
are enhanced or ended based on where we go next. Because I've always believed that people come into your life for a reason, for a season, or for a lifetime. And most people come in for a reason or a season. There's only a handful of people who are in your life for a lifetime. And unfortunately, a lot of the people who are in our lives can be there because they get energy from us in a way that it may not be for our best ways. So let's say you're drinking too much, or you're eating too much, or you're on drugs or whatever. You're both probably enabling each other to get into that negative habit, and you're both sort of backing each other up. But when you decide to change, those people who are getting that energy from you will drop out of your life, and they'll find someone else to claw onto. Because it's unfortunately unusual that a group of people will all get their act together at the same time. And it's usually the one person who does it is then moving on and moving up, whether the others sort of close ranks and continue to do the other negative thing that they were doing anyway. And there's a way of justifying it to make that person look like the
Yeah.
caterpillar has become a butterfly, and now the butterfly's a weirdo because they're off flying around, whereas we're still here on the ground munching on leaves.
Mm-hmm.
And
I agree, and I've experienced that so many times, Patrick, because I have changed so much about myself and my life. And I remember hearing you say that last year. Actually, when I was hearing you speak on stage, I was jotting these notes down, and I remember specifically you talking about that very topic: a reason, a season, or a lifetime. And there's just such peace when you recognize that, because I'm a very empathic person, and I love connecting with people. To me, there's no greater joy in the world than being able to connect with people. And for me to let go of people was always quite difficult, because I feel a responsibility, or I feel compassion or something. But recognizing that not only is it often best for yourself, but it's often best for them too, because the people who are, as you said, like an example of getting energy from you or whatever, if it's in an unhealthy way, then by continuing that, we actually enable and support them to continue on that path. And sometimes the healthiest and kindest, most compassionate thing you can do is step away from a relationship like that for that person to be able to walk on their own 2 feet and not feel like they have to come to you for that kind of stuff. It helps other people to be a bit more independent. And it took me a long time to recognize that. And I've had to do the same thing where, some relationships, as you change and grow, others aren't changing and growing. You're grateful for the time that they spent with you in your life and the part of the journey that they were on with you, but you let them go with peace, love, and gratitude. And, that doesn't have to be painful or fearful about letting people go. It's just that all of this happens as a natural process of life. And the more you can do it with grace and flow and peace, the easier it is. And you welcome the next wave of people who come and know that they're probably going to pass as well. It's just makes it a lot easier when you put it into that context.
Yeah. I'm recording this podcast through Anchor. And if you're considering doing a podcast and you haven't heard about Anchor, then let me tell you, it's the easiest way to do a podcast. So let me explain. It's free. There are creation tools that allow you to record and edit your podcast right from your phone or computer. Anchor will distribute the podcast for you, so it can be heard on Spotify, Apple Podcast, and many other platforms. You can make money from your podcast with no minimum listenership. And it's everything that you need to make a podcast all in one place. Definitely check it out. Download the app now from the store. Exactly that. Exactly what you said there. It's freeing as well to know that season has ended. Like I've known this great person and we've really got on well, and there's nothing negative or bad about it. It's just now that our season has ended and they're going off in direction A and I'm going in direction B, and we may see them down the line again in 1 year, 10 years, 20 years, and we'll reminisce about the great times we had then. But I think to keep my circle small, the real core element is what keeps me sort of protected in a way, and to keep a state of fluctuation and allowance on the wider circle where people are flowing in and flowing out.
Yeah.
And understand that is life and that is the natural momentum of life, because we're all moving at different paces as well, and we all take turns in life and go in different directions, positive or negative. And when you go off in a positive or negative way, you're going off that path into a new path. So of course you're going to leave people behind. So, and vice versa, let them people go off on their path too, and don't try and hold on to them too tight. Give them that space to do their thing, and just trust the journey.
Yeah, I'm so with you. And I found that when in my own life, and I see it in others as well, when people try to grasp on too tightly to something or someone, whether it be a job or, a relationship or whatever, right? Grasping on so tightly to something and not allowing the natural flow of life that things come and go, right? There's the whole topic of impermanence, right? Nothing is really permanent. Is that when we relax, and a lot of times it's fear that causes people to grip onto something because they're so afraid of losing whatever that is, because part of their identity may be tied up in that relationship or that job or that situation or that house, and if by losing that, what will it mean of me? Yeah. But actually, when we let go of a lot of those things and we don't hold on so tightly, but we just love and we allow people and situations to grow. When we're staying stuck with a circle of people and never changing, we aren't changing and growing. And when we are changing and growing, naturally people change and grow with us, and some don't. And when people aren't changing and growing with us, there are new people we meet on our path that help us to change and grow even more. And it's a beautiful thing. And when you look at all of this life as one great big flow, that you're just going on this journey and you'll be introduced to things. And as you said, season, reason, lifetime, just take it like that, whether it's jobs or money or relationships or whatever. That's just how it all goes. And the more ease and flow we can have with it, the happier we'll be at the end of the day. It's when we resist and try to hold on that things become more difficult.
The best analogy I have for what you just said so well is, if you think about, if you dip your hand into the beach and take up a handful of sand, if you let that sand sit on your hand without trying to grasp it, it'll sit there and it'll stay. But the moment you squeeze your hands around that sand, what happens is it runs out through your fingers, and you actually end up with very little left. So let the sand sit on your hand, and let the things that are in your life sit there. Don't try to hold them, strangle them, or grip on them. And also I find that I have stopped a long time ago explaining myself and complaining. So I don't explain and I don't complain. So when people want to see the things that I do and why I do it, they can observe it. And if they want to ask me about why I do it, and they're genuinely interested, then I will tell them. So why do you not drink alcohol? And most people are not asking that question because they want to know why I've stopped. They want to know how it reflects on them. why are they still drinking and why are they still having hangovers? And that's okay. But when I always get a sense when people genuinely want to know, why does this guy not drink alcohol? He seems to be getting on well in life and he's doing 5 or 6 things that I've never considered. How is these things making his life better? If that's what they're trying to get to, really, I will answer. But if they're just asking me about why you're not doing what we do, then I'm not going to explain myself to that type of question.
Yeah, there's a big difference in people asking questions that have a hidden judgment in them versus asking questions out of sincere curiosity and learning.
Exactly that. And also, people have to understand that a lot of the people around us are committed to misunderstanding us. So no matter what you say and how many ways you try to phrase it or help them, they will be committed to misunderstanding you and sharing it with others in a way that makes you look bad. And you have to understand that you should not be feeding those people at all. And in fact, you shouldn't be around those people because you're the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with. Your salary, your bank account, your weight, your levels of happiness. These things are a reflection of the people that you're around. So if you're around 5 millionaires, you will be the 6th. Just because you've got access to ideas and money and finances and business acumen and things like that. If you're around people who sit at home and eat pizza all night and smoke dope, you're probably going to become less productive, probably lose your job and put on weight. I mean, that's the outcomes of those types of habits. So I always say to people, just be careful of who you're around. You know, who looks like your future, who looks like the person that you want to leave behind. Like, don't be afraid to lose them seasons and let them come to an end because it's best for what you want.
Yeah, and so often, when people are going through change, it's so hard to let go of what's familiar. You know, because there's security and comfort in the known, even though it doesn't feel right. You know there's something wrong and you want something else. So many people find themselves too afraid to let go of what they know to step into the unknown.
Yeah.
But the truth is, that's where the magic happens.
It's a good point.
And yeah, and for me, there's been a lot that I've consciously let go of in my life to intentionally change and be different, which means that some people haven't been happy with my choices and whatever, but I can honestly look back and say I'm pleased with the changes that I've made because I like the person that I am today. And you can live to other people's expectations, or you can, respect and love yourself for who you are because you are your best self, or know that you're living your own truth. Because at the end of the day, that's far more valuable than trying to meet other people's expectations.
Yeah.
Because the truth is you'll never meet them. There'll always be somebody's expectations that are beyond, and you find yourself constantly striving to please other people or meet their expectations, and it's not possible. So really living your own truth and being authentic to yourself and being brave enough to let go of things that keep you from that. That's where the magic starts to happen.
Completely agree. So I see you, Adrienne, as a wonderful feminine female leader, like a really good modern leader, the type of human who will make this world a better place for the people whose path we cross, or whose path you cross. And
thank you.
What advice do you have for others who are trying to be true to themselves? Other women who are trying to put themselves forward and be leaders and sort of step up and talk in front of audiences like you do so eloquently. Have you any advice, or have you any sort of just whatever, just to sort of help those people who are listening who would like to sort of shine more bright within their own light like you have?
Yeah, I think a couple of things come to mind, Patrick. One is, I unfortunately spent a lot of years in corporate environments feeling like I needed to be and show up in ways that other people expected of me. And often as a woman, that is a more masculine kind of approach. And what we see sometimes is that, people think that a woman is being dominant because they're trying to behave a certain way. But you know what? Kindness and compassion and, you can be a woman and bring out some of the best feminine traits, and all men and women have feminine and masculine traits, so I don't want to pretend that that's not the case. We all do. But as women, we're typically a little bit more gifted with things around like compassion and heart and whatever. And, trying to operate in a business world without demonstrating that, you know what? It's about balance and bringing balance both within ourselves and within the environments that we work in. So if we're all trying to operate in a way that is not showing the kind of compassion and heart and empathy and whatever in the environment, it's going to manifest itself in bad ways. And I know I did that for a long time before I gained the confidence to show up as my authentic self.
Yeah.
And the other thing too is what I find is that, that it's not about your voice necessarily being heard and everything in every instance, about having to make a point to make your voice heard. It's the quality of what you're sharing and the information. So like speaking on stage, for example, I had, when I first started speaking at events, I was really nervous, as most people are, and thought, I've got to come across perfectly. I've got to do this. I've got to do that. I've got to, it was about stage presence, and it was about, how I messaged. And the truth is, and actually, Patrick, I'm going to have to say this, you demonstrate this better than most anybody I've ever seen, because when you're on a stage, it's like having a conversation with a guy who's up there and there's hundreds of people in the room, but you're having a conversation with that guy. It really is about just being your authentic self, and people respond so much better when we are genuine, authentic, sincere, and relatable. And, yes, the message needs to have relevance to the people you're talking to, etc. But when we speak from the heart and we're genuine and authentic about ourselves, then it makes an impact with people in some way. And it carries more, I think it has more of an impact when we're like that than when we try to have a perfectly crafted message and stage presence per se,
Genuine, authentic, sincere, relatable. That's perfectly encapsulated. And I really appreciate your compliment about how I am on stage, because I don't get nervous. And the reason I don't get nervous is because I always say that I am enough. Like, I am enough. I can't do what Adrienne does, because if I try, I will fail. And Adrienne is way better at that than I am. And so is, Radharani, and so is, Stoyan and those people. They're brilliant at what they do. And if I tried to do any of that, I would be so nervous, for starters, because I wouldn't be true who I am. And if you remember the time you seen me on stage, I had just come off flights from...
Yes.
I had flights on flights for like whatever, 18 or 19 hours, and I had just walked in, and I don't even know what I said, but I just wanted to make sure I represented that audience well and the brand of Samodiva brand well, and I was exhausted, I can tell you. But
well, you came across with such life and energy. We were none the wiser till you told us
I was in bits,
afterwards.
but the thing is, I was true to who I was, and because I didn't really need much more energy to tell that story on stage than I do to, talk to the guy on the metro in Stockholm, because it's sort of the same message that I'm using all the time. And the only difference about being on stage is that I've got slides to back me up, so it's more visual. And what you said about genuine, authentic, sincere, relatable, that's the only thing I'm trying to do for me, just to be that for me. And if I can be that for me, then it'll probably come across like that to those who are listening. And the other thing that I do to make sure that I'm not too worried about how my performance is when I'm on stage or on podcasts or whatever, is that I realize that actually about 5% of that audience is there to not even there to hear me, but I'll resonate with about 5% on that day. So some people will be looking at their phones, some people will look bored, some people will be yawning, and maybe they're there to hear the Adrienne message or the Stoyan message, and that's okay, because you can't be liked by 100% of the people 100% of the time. But what I say on that day might resonate with someone 6 months later or 6 years later, and it might plant a seed on that day. And as long as I know that And the thing you'll always recognize is this, is whenever you come off stage, there's always going to be a percentage of the people who run up to you and want to talk to you and tell you about a similar experience that they had, which relates to what they've done. That's your tribe. That's your audience for that day. And if some of them run to me, some of them is going to run to you, some of them is going to run to Stoyan, some is going to run to Radharani, because we've all resonated with them, and that's our audience, and that's our tribe for that day. And then you're going to find actually 4 weeks later, you get a few different emails from people. And they're the people who really hits hard, but they don't want to be seen to be running up to you in front of others. But they really want to go away and think about it, let it germinate within their mind, and then they'll email you and tell you their thoughts and how it resonated with them and what they agreed and didn't agree with. And I know that that's going to be the pattern. But as long as I'm saying things that I believe is true, it's okay.
Yeah, and I'm with you, and I have exactly the same experience. And the one thing I would add to that, too, is sometimes I'm surprised by the people that I expect to have an impact on versus the people that I suddenly am shocked by having an impact on. And this is the point, is that you never know who you're influencing. Whether it doesn't matter to me if I'm on a stage of 1,000 people, I'm gonna connect with a few of them, and with some of them it will make a difference, and that's brilliant. But actually showing up every day, day in and day out, living authentically with integrity and compassion for people, you don't know how many people you're impacting day in and day out in your personal life, in your work, in your circles. I mean, for me, honestly, Patrick, you can give me an audience of 1,000 people. That's fine. I'll go up there. I'll do my thing and be happy. But also let me have an influence on my 12 nieces and nephews and help shape the way those little minds show up in the world to make that next generation be even just a little bit more compassionate and loving than we were. That means even more to me than a room full of 1,000 people.
For sure.
And that, with the little nieces and nephews, that's actually the harder job. Me standing up for an hour on a stage of 1,000 people, it's a lot of work, don't get me wrong. But me showing up with an integrity and love and compassion and acceptance and forgiveness day in and day out for these little lives that are around me, and being consistent with it, that's harder, right?
Yeah.
Because they see more of you. So for me, you never know when you've got an audience around you.
Yeah.
So it's not about it, for whether it's in work or on stages or whatever it is we're doing. It's about showing up authentically with love and compassion for people and living your own truth every day, because there's always an audience there, whether they're paid or not.
Exactly. And the fact that you can germinate those seeds of compassion and empathy within 12 kids will actually have probably a bigger impact. It's funny because from maybe every 2 or 3 months, I will get an email or a DM or something on social media. I met backpacking, and they'll always say the same thing. Do you remember that thing you told me when we met? And I'm always like, no.
I have no idea.
But,
I have no idea.
But they never tell me what it was. But I always have to go. I remember. Of course, I remember chatting with you. I remember the crack. But I don't remember. We probably talked about a lot of stuff over the 2 hours or the 2 days that we were backpacking together. So I don't actually know which one resonated with you or what seed I planted. But it's great it's a great reminder for me that I do have to show up, and that in a way people do expect. They have a sort of slightly higher expectation of me not to let them down, and therefore I try to be true to who I am every day, but I try to see the human being and respect their position in the world. And the fact that we have crossed paths means that my approach to this person is I'm going to see them as my teacher, because I know that everybody, no matter if they're 2 years old or 102 years old, have something to teach me. And that makes me more humble. And if I come at someone with a humble approach, then I will learn from them. And the irony is I will also then be able to teach them something.
Yeah.
And I'll leave something with them, which is whatever that phrase I said in a hostel or as we climbed the mountain backpacking in, Borneo or somewhere.
Yeah. And to me, it is such an amazing honor when people say, oh, this, you said this. And even when you're not on a stage, it's like when a casual environment, when you least expect it, or that person that you never expected to connect with, when those people reach out and say, do you know what I want to tell you? You influenced me when you said, I'll never forget, you think, wow. And it just brings home, I get so amazed every time about the power of your words and your influence, even when you least expect it.
But that's you. That's what you just said is the impact you had on me.
Oh, thank you, Patrick. That's
Honestly,
lovely.
you have got that thing in you, which is just, it's a beautiful, pure femininity. And you really bring that each day. This is the truth. See, when I come off that stage, I remember coming around the back of the audience, and I was then dead. And you and Radharani both says that was awesome, and I was like, "What? Seriously?" And I appreciated it so much because I was in such a tired, fatigued state. I was sort of going from chunk to chunk to chunk of what I said, and if it wasn't for the slides, I probably wouldn't have got through it. But I remember the kindness in you both, and I could see it in your eyes, the kindness and the smiles that you had. That, wow, I had an impact on these two amazing women, and that meant everything to me. Actually, coming off the stage that day, and that's
Yeah.
who you are as a person. You are that person who will. It's. I would rather be around you each day than not around you. You're that person,
Oh,
you know.
I think we have that mutual characteristic, Patrick, because you're the same. I think it's that. I think all it is really warmth, sincerity, and kindness, and that you've got a genuine, unconditional love for people. And look, we're not always going to agree with everybody, and it's not so, like saying I want to spend all my time with everyone, but I can love the person within. And I think we all have a sense of when we're around people like that, and you're exactly the same, that there's just this amazing vibe you feel. And people get that from you too, Patrick, and myself included, that you just feel this instant love and connection and warmth that I may not know this person, but it's just there. And I think what you actually see in me is the same thing I see in you.
Yeah, and that's humanity. That's where
Yeah,
everyone is a reflection. You have to have it within you to see it within the others. So if you say that
correct.
someone is a nasty person, then you must have that in within you to see it within them, and you must actually then do the work within yourself,
Yeah.
to make sure you're not that. And if someone said something lovely about me, I always say, well, that's what you have within you, and I really appreciate you saying it because you
Yeah.
must have that. Otherwise, if you didn't have it, you wouldn't know it was. You couldn't see it within someone else.
Yeah.
It must be there. Everyone that we meet is the mirror of what we have within inside us,
It's
and
exactly true. And the
and
more we work on ourselves, the more we become, I guess, the more we can be our true selves. There's two things with this. One is that we see people differently, right? And we heal part of the world by healing ourselves. But also, the other thing is that the gift within each and every person is that we're each unique, and we're the same and you're unique at the same time. We're all loving, compassionate beings that are here, but we might have been taught in different ways or given different beliefs or been brought up in different ways, right? So we think we have different mindsets, but at the core, we're really the same. But within each of us are exactly what you were saying before about you don't try to be me, I don't try to be you. We have our own way of showing up in the world. We have our own unique gifts and experiences. And when we bring that out in ourselves, the world is a better place.
oh
And
man,
so many people I find are playing a role they think they're expected to play, and they limit and they diminish their own light of who they are. And if we could just get past the fear and the constraints that we feel like we have to bring more of our own natural light to the world, accepting and loving ourselves as we ultimately then accept and love the other people in the world as they are as well. And I know I sound a little bit Pollyanna, kumbaya, but I believe this wholeheartedly, and that's how I want to live. And I know you believe it too, Patrick. So it's how do we bring more of that into the world, and that's really what my life's work is about. I mean, today I'm showing it up professionally in slightly different ways, but at the core, that's what my work is, and it'll take on more and more of that as it develops.
I can't add any more. What a wonderful ending to a wonderful conversation with one of my favorite ladies.
Thanks,
So
Patrick. It's a real honor to be able to do this with you. And honestly, it's just, you can probably hear it through the voice that I've got the biggest grin on my face of spending the last hour with you. It's like a big dose of happy drug. It's lovely. And I'm grateful.
You're amazing. If people want to connect with you to bring you within their business for consulting or for guest spots on podcasts or many things that people should be utilizing your amazing presence for, how should they get in contact with you, and what's the best place for them to find you?
So my website is adriennegibson.com. All my social media details are there, but Facebook and LinkedIn, it's Adrienne Gibson. Twitter and Instagram, it's Adrienne C. Gibson. And write me directly at adrienne@adriennegibson.com.
Fantastic. So, I'll put everything within the bio here as well so people can find you. And I just want to say it's an honor to have you come on the podcast and just share your feminine wisdom with us and all the great that you are.
Thank you, Patrick. I appreciate you creating the opportunity, and I love watching your work from afar. I mean, I know we've only met up the one time last year, but I do stay connected to your work, and I'm really proud as a friend to watch what you're doing in the world, and it inspires me too. So don't take that for granted that, we may not be in touch all the time, but there are people out there watching your work and being inspired by it all the time. So thank you for doing what you do.
You're the best. Adrienne, thank you so much. It's an honor.
Thanks, Patrick. Likewise.
Thanks, darling. God bless.
All right. You take care.
See you. Bye.
All right. Bye-bye.